Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be taking a look at what I consider to be the ultimate 6.5 Creed SAPR, or semi-automatic precision rifle. And yes, that is a term I absolutely stole from Nuttin' Fancy. Now, before we get into the video, if you'd like to help me out personally, you can always like, share, and subscribe, as that is all free and does help me out quite a bit. On top of that, there's also Subscribestar, which is basically just a pro to a Patreon. There's also my website, which has some cool things in stock. And while you're here, go ahead and comment your ideal semi-automatic precision rifle setup in the comments down below. Now, the big three sponsors of the channel are going to be Optics Planet. They send out gear to the channel, and if you use code FOCUS at checkout, you'll save 7%, which of course helps you save a little bit of money. If you need ammunition, Callaway Ballistics is the ammunition sponsor of the channel. Again, you can use code FOCUS to save some money. And the last one is going to be Hunter's Point Shooting Complex for letting me come out and film with their very interesting sounding range. Now, full disclosure on the rifle and components. Everything on the base rifle and the suppressor I paid for myself. Now, it's mostly Ballistic Advantage and Aero Precision, and I do have dealer accounts with them, so I do get a lot of their parts at reduced prices, but just keep that in mind that I did pay my own money, again, at dealer costs. Now, the light and optics, all of that was sent out to me for free, so I did not pay for those whatsoever. So again, just keep that in mind going forward. Now, getting into what is a semi-automatic precision rifle and what we have here. This is a 18-inch 6.5 Creed. Now, a semi-automatic precision rifle, as I'm going to determine it, is basically just a large frame AR or any other platform that will accept 308, 6.5 Creed, so on and so forth, and of course, semi-automatic with a high level of accuracy. Now, talking about caliber for just a minute, 308 versus 6.5 Creed, 308 does have a couple advantages over 6.5 Creedmoor, but when it actually comes to hitting targets at distance, 6.5 Creed is just much more ballistically efficient and it has less recoil. There are a ton of advantages when it comes to actually hitting the target that 6.5 Creed gives me, so I was not interested in 308 whatsoever. And after using this build for some time now, I'm not really interested in going back to 308 at all. Again, 6.5 Creedmoor, when it comes to actually putting rounds on target, is just much more effective than 308, less recoil. There's a lot of advantages when it comes to actually putting a round on target. Now, 308 does have some advantages. For instance, if you're using it in like a main battle rifle where you need to have a lot of ammunition for it, it's of course going to be more economical and still be very capable out to distance. However, if we're not doing a insanely high volume of fire like a main battle rifle or something you're going to be using all the time in more of a precision application, I think 6.5 Creedmoor makes infinitely more sense than 308. Now, getting into the components, we'll go ahead and start with the base rifle. Up front, we have the YHM Resonator K, which is, of course, a fairly small suppressor. It is effective at reducing the flash, reducing the signature just a little bit, of course, also taking the edge off of the noise. Now, if I'm not using the suppressor, what we have on here, this is the Rearden SPB, the single port brake, which is mildly effective at controlling recoil. It is not the most aggressive brake on the market, but it does do a good enough job at controlling recoil. And if you want to have a high volume of accurate fire, quick follow-up shots, a muzzle brake is absolutely the way to go. The way that I have it set up, I was running suppressed about 70% of the time, and if I'm not running it suppressed, if I'm already going loud, I'd rather have the advantage of having less recoil to deal with, faster follow-up shots, so on and so forth. Now, the nice thing about the Rearden, the very small single-port brake, is the fact that it obviously is really small and compact. It's only slightly heavier than an A2, and I believe it's actually a little bit shorter than an A2 flash hider, and of course doubles as a mount for the Rearden Plan B. And as a suppressor mounting system, it's very simple. It's also very, very efficient in terms of size and weight, much smaller and lighter than the YHM system with less dispersion and less to go wrong with it. Overall, just a big upgrade over the YHM QD adapters. Now, the barrel. This is a 18-inch mid-length 6.5 Creedmoor. This is the Ballistic Advantage Hansen profile. This is the .875 profile. Now, they have a couple different profiles. They have the .875 and the .750. The .750 is going to have a smaller taper to a .750 gas block and then basically a straight taper to the end. The .875 has a much thicker .875 taper to, of course, the .875 gas block journal, and then, of course, about a .750 out to the end. Now, when it comes to the materials and finish, this is part of their premium black series. So this is a 416R stainless steel barrel, 1-in-8 twist, coated in a black nitride. Now, one of the main disadvantages of 6.5 Creed versus 308 is going to be barrel life. Now, Barrel life is going to fluctuate depending on ammunition, firing schedule, barrel material, the actual quality, finishing work, all of that sort of stuff. However, in general, let's say you're going to get about 2,500 to 3,000 rounds of match accuracy out of a 6.5 Creed barrel versus anywhere from 7 to 10,000 rounds of 308. So you are cutting your barrel life down significantly. However, in my application, that really doesn't matter. For instance, I will probably never reach 3,000 rounds of 6.5 Creedmoor on this barrel, as that is incredibly expensive. And again, I am a dealer for Ballistic Advantage, so the price of a barrel versus the price of 3,000 rounds of match ammo is like 1% or something like that. So it is a very, very small operational cost. But again, if you're using it as a battle rifle, something where you're going to be doing a very high volume of fire with, then 308 can make sense to extend that barrel life. However, again, 3,000 rounds of 6.5 Creedmoor is probably more than I will ever put through this barrel. Now, moving on to the handguard, this is one of Aero Precision's Atlas R1 handguards. It is perfectly fine. It's not necessarily the best rail on the market. So you have M-LOK at the 3, 6, and 9. On the R1, you have the full-length Picatinny on top. I almost went with the S1 rail, which is the exact same rail, but it deletes about 70 to 80% of the Picatinny on top. Depending on what you're doing, if you don't need the Picatinny, that will save you about 3 or 4 ounces. And if you wanted the lighter profile 0.750 barrel, that would save you another 6 ounces or so. So you're heading towards a pound of savings with just a few different parts. Now, one of the issues that I have with the Atlas R1 or any of the Atlas rails is the lockup isn't particularly great. So it uses their taper lock system on their steel barrel nut. It's fine. It's nothing special whatsoever. It puts a little bit of force on the bottom of the barrel nut, and it has very little clamping area as well. So it's not necessarily the most confidence-inspiring lockup. It also doesn't have any sort of anti-rotation devices at all. It just mounts directly to the barrel nut. The barrel nut also does need to be timed on their large platform, LR308, DPMS, whatever you guys want to call it. But it does need to be timed with some shims to make sure that you can actually get the gas tube to line up, which is a little bit obnoxious. And again, it's different than their AR-15 platforms because those do not need to be timed whatsoever. As far as rails go, they're basically okay. There's nothing really special about them. I suppose they're fine for the money, that sort of thing. But again, not necessarily my favorite on the market. Now, the upper receiver is perfectly fine. This is again one of their M5 upper receivers. Nothing special about it. You do have a threaded pin for the forward assist, which of course this does have. As far as it goes for an upper receiver, it's not necessarily the heaviest or lightest for the large frame AR market, but again, it's sort of fine. Now, the charging handle on here, this is one of the Aero Breach charging handles. And this is actually very nice. It is, of course, the large latch ambidextrous. It also does have some gas busting capabilities. You have a raised ridge in the back and then some vents on the actual shaft as well, which in theory will redirect some of those gases. Now, we'll talk about gassing a little bit later on, but again, this was suppressed about 70% of the time, and the gas back to the face was extremely minimal for a large frame AR. Now, the BCG that I'm using, this is just one of their 308/65 Creedmoor BCGs. It's perfectly fine. Again, there's not really a lot of special things going on with it. The reason that I went with the nickel boron version is that I know that large frame ARs get very gross very quickly. You get a bunch of gas getting back in the system, especially just because you have a lot more volume in the case, so you're going to get a lot more coming back. And this is what it looks like after several hundred rounds of 6.5 Creedmoor. Again, most of that suppressed. Now, the thing about large frame ARs, and one of the biggest disadvantages, is that they do require more cleaning. For instance, a regular DI AR-15 can go 2,000 or 3,000 rounds without much cleaning or lubrication, as long as it's a quality AR with nice parts, so on and so forth, depending on what suppressor you're using, what ammunition, all those sort of factors apply. In a large frame AR, you're gonna need to clean and lube probably every 500 to 1,000 rounds because they are a little bit more finicky and they get very gross very quickly. This BCG hasn't been cleaned yet, though I did add some lubrication on the last range day, as I could feel the system was gumming up and being very, very slow and sluggish to get back into battery. Just by cycling the action, you could tell that it was getting gummed up. So did add some lube, and that's just something you need to be aware of when you're using a large frame AR. Now, the lower receiver is just the Aero M5 lower, so it does match the upper receiver and the rest of the build just fine. They do kind of have a little bit of a flares magwell for your magazine changes if you're using it in like a 3-gun and like a heavy division or something like that. Overall, the lower receiver is fairly basic. There are 2 components on it that I've swapped out. The first one is going to be the trigger, which we'll talk about in just a second, and then the stock. This is the UTG Pro S3. The S1 is a small stock, the S2 is like a normal size stock, and then the S3 is big with a big cheek weld, rubber butt pad, QD points on it. And it's just for this sort of build where I'm not really that concerned with weight. It's a very comfy sort of stock, and again, it's made in the USA, and you can pick them up for like 40 bucks. Now, going on to the trigger, this is a no-name rebrand 2-stage trigger. It is incredibly light. I believe you can find these at like AR-15 discounts. They call them like the NBS or something like that. It's basically that exact same trigger, and I'm not sure who the OEM is. You have a little bit of take-up on the trigger itself, maybe a pound of take-up. Then you hit that second stage, of course. And on that second stage, as soon as you start applying a little bit more pressure, it immediately starts to do a little bit of a rolling break for a total pull weight of probably 3 pounds. This is a very, very light trigger. Now, the reset on the trigger is very short, very forced. It is a very quick trigger if you wanted to do that. You're right back on the wall. Again, you have a little short take up, maybe a pound, and as soon as you start adding a little bit more pressure, you get a rolling break, and it is very, very short. Again, total pull weight, probably about 3 pounds. It's honestly a little bit lighter than what I would like for a duty style of build, I suppose, but for precision shooting, it's very good. Now, my favorite 2-stage trigger is the Geisley G2S. Not because it is lighter, it's actually a little bit heavier. It's about 4.5 pounds, somewhere in that range. But because it is very, very easy to tell when that second stage is going to break, and so it's very easy to prep your shots and then pull when you want. With this one here, it is very, very light, and again, it starts to roll once you add a little bit of more pressure in that second stage. So you need to be very, very mindful of your trigger control, as you should always, but it's just something you need to be especially cognizant of when using a very, very light trigger. Now, talking about some of the extras we have on the build, up front we have the HRT AWLS, which is a very, very powerful rifle light. It's one of the few rifle lights that can actually stretch out to 200 plus yards in certain circumstances. I believe it's like 1,750 lumens and then like 90,000 candela, something like that. So it is a very powerful rifle light, which does work well if you are going to use it on something like this with, again, a little bit longer legs. The hand stop that I'm using, this is from Grovtec, just one of their angled hand stops. I am using a BCM QD for a sling. Now, the Atlas R1 does have sling points on the left and right hand side of the rail. However, they don't work with some of my slings. Not sure if that's an issue with my slings or with this specific Atlas R1, but again, the BCM QD is steel and it does work just fine. Now, getting into the optics, up top we have the best glass that I currently own. This is the Maven RS1 2.5 to 15. You guys have seen this before, and I've compared it to some other optics that I have. This is a made in Japan optic, and it looks a little bit better than 2 of the German scopes that I currently have on hand. The glass quality in this is phenomenal. You have fantastic eye relief, fantastic field of view. The total weight of the scope itself is like 25 ounces. Currently, as you see it here, it is in a worn 193. I know some people don't like 193 mounts for precision rifle scopes. I find it to be very comfortable, but to each their own. Now, the offset green dot in this case, this is the Viridian RFX 45. This is a 5 MOA green dot. Works very well sitting in a Grovtec 45-degree offset. And again, if you're going to be using this in a do-it-all sort of application, a light offset dot is very needed. If you're just doing PRS or something else where you're not going to need any of that other stuff, you can, of course, take it off and utilize that space a little bit better. Now, when it comes to actually shooting the gun, fortunately, basically every Ballistic Advantage Hansen barrel is gassed very, very softly. Sometimes a little bit too soft. So on this 18-inch mid-length barrel, the gas port size is like 0.055. It's actually a little bit smaller than I can pin gauge because my pin gauge set only goes down to 0.060, and this is a little bit smaller than that. Again, I would guess anywhere in the 0.05 range to 0.055, somewhere in that. Now, the gassing on that with 6.5 Creed with most of the ammunition that I was using was fantastic. Without a suppressor on, you would get 330 to 4 o'clock ejection, which is right on the bleeding edge of reliability. The first couple rounds that I put through it had a little bit of a break-in period for literally like 2 rounds. I think the second round didn't quite feed properly, though that also could have been a magazine-related issue, as we'll talk about a little bit later on. But again, the gassing on it is very, very soft. We did have one issue, a failure to feed, I believe, on like the second round that I put through it, but after that, it's been perfectly reliable. Again, when we put a suppressor on the system, you are getting a lot more gunk back into the system. You are definitely overdriving the gun. You could throw in a heavier buffer if you wanted to. We're just using a standard weight buffer and a 308 power spring in the back end. But even with a suppressor on it, it is still a very soft shooting gun. Now, one of the other benefits of 6.5 Creedmoor versus 308 is not only is it much more ballistically efficient, better at just getting out to target, but it also has about 30% less recoil. Now, as you see it here, if we throw the suppressor and a bipod and a magazine with some ammo in it, we're looking about a 14-pound gun. So 14-pound AR-10, whatever you guys want to call it, combined with the lower recoil of 6.5 Creedmoor, means you get a very, very soft shooting gun. Whether it's suppressed or with the muzzle brake, it is very, very easy to spot your own impacts out to 600-700 yards. Now, when I'm shooting, I don't even own a spotting scope, so I have to do all of my own, spotting my misses, so on and so forth, and it is incredibly easy to do so with one, very good glass, but also low recoil, high accuracy of 6.5 Creedmoor. Now, compared to 308, again, you're dealing with less wind, less drop, less recoil. Again, when it comes to actually hitting targets, 6.5 Creedmoor is much, much more effective. Getting into reliability, the only real issue that I can attribute to the gun itself was, again, that kind of short stroking in the very, very beginning of testing on the rifle. After that, it was perfectly fine. The one issue that I was running into was with some of the Duramags, some of the 20-round 308 Duramags. It would not pick up the second round in the magazine. I'm not sure why that is, but sometimes it just would straight up not pick up the second round in the Duramags. However, the Magpul magazines, they fed perfectly regardless of how much ammo was in the magazine. I didn't have any issues with them whatsoever. They're also lighter. They have a little bit tighter fit in the magwell. The Duramags, they look very nice. I like the way they feel, but they have a little bit more wiggle in the magazine well on this specific lower, so not sure if that was what was causing my issue with them. So as far as the semi-automatic portion of being a SAPR goes, it does that part very well. It is very easy to lay down a lot of fire very quickly, and it's, again, very reliable as well. Now, when it comes to the precision rifle part of it, unfortunately, I didn't get that great of results when it came to accuracy. Now, the ammo that I was using, I had, I believe, 3 different types of ammo out with me. I had the best ammo, or at least the most expensive ammo, was the Hornady. This is the ELD-M, so this is the 147 grain stuff. This is like $40 to $50 a box, depending on where you get it from. Then I had several boxes of the S&B 142 grain, and then I had a lot of the Winchester white box. This is 125 grain, so this is light for caliber. This is the open tip range, so this isn't even really a match ammo. Now, getting into accuracy testing with the 147 grain ELD-Ms, again, the most expensive ammo that I have, it shot about 2 MOA, which is certainly not fantastic for a pretty heavy barrel. Not a true heavy barrel, but a pretty heavy barrel. 2 MOA is not fantastic. It also, unfortunately, shot about 2 MOA with the SNB 142 grain, and actually shot the best with the Winchester white box, the 125 grain open tip range. It shot about 1.25 to 1.5 MOA, which, keep in mind that this ammo was $18 a box at SG Ammo. So, one of the other downsides of 6.5 Creed versus 308 is that 308 you do have access to a lot of cheap ammunition, whether that be like really gross ball ammo or like steel case ammo. However, if you're going to be comparing match ammo to match ammo, 6.5 Creed might still be a little bit more expensive, but you're getting more capability for that expense. Now, as it stands right now, this Winchester white box, which is what I was taking out to 600 yards consistently, had no issues with that whatsoever, even at 1.25, 1.5 MOA. Honestly, none of the ammunition had any problem getting out to 600 yards. But again, for under $1 per round, the Winchester white box performed phenomenally. In fact, it performed the best out of all of the 3 loads that I was testing for the least amount of money, which is a win in my book, and that is something that I will probably end up buying several more cases of. Again, for the performance, you can't really argue with it. So again, you can get cheaper 308 loads, ball or anything, down to 60, 70 cents a round. But if you're going to be buying 308 match ammo, then you're going to be spending, $25 to $45 a box, and you're going to be in that 6.5 Creed ballpark. Now, even with that just Winchester white box out to 900 yards, it's going to be far ballistically superior to anything else, 308, 5.56, 6.8 SPC, 6.5 Grendel, any of those. And at under $1 per round, that's even extremely competitive with like 5.56 precision ammo with much higher BCs and much better performance at distance. So And again, with the cost per ammo argument, depending on what ammunition you're using, you can definitely find other calibers for cheaper, even with cheaper match ammo. But again, the performance of 6.5 Creed, even out of a, quote unquote non-match ammo, is going to be far better than some other calibers top tier match ammo, if that makes sense. So as far as I'm concerned, 6.5 Creedmoor is absolutely the way to go for a SAPR setup. Again, 308 doesn't really make much sense ballistically for me personally anymore. Now, if you have a ton of 308 lying around and it's your thing, that's totally fine. Or in more of a battle rifle application where you're going to be doing a lot of shooting with it, then again, 308 can make sense in that sort of application. But for anything precision, anytime I'm going 6, 7, 8, 900, 1,000 yards, I think an 18-inch 6.5 Creed makes a lot of sense. Now, you can always go longer, 20, 24-inch and 6.5 Creed to get even more velocity out of it. But again, keep in mind that even an 18-inch 6.5 Creed is still going to be beating something like a 20 or a 24-inch 308. So it is very size and weight efficient. And again, you're dealing with less recoil as well. So again, when it comes to the semi-automatic precision rifle, laying down accurate fire at distance, actually putting the round on target, 6.5 Creed makes way more sense to me personally than 308 does. Now, something that this certainly is not is a hiking gun or a hunting rifle. This is definitely set up as more of a semi-static position rifle, light positional shooting, that sort of thing. You're definitely not going to be running and gunning with this all day. If you did want something, again, in 6.5 Creed or any larger caliber, and you wanted to have it in a more high mobility setup, you're going to be switching out some of the components, cutting off weight where you can. And there are actually other rifles that make more sense in that role. The Ruger SAPR or the POF, they have one of their kind of small-ish 308 rifles that's fairly lightweight. If you need a high mobility, high firepower setup, those can make sense. But again, for me personally, semi-static positional shooting, PRS, something like that, that is what this is currently set up for. So there's my setup for the ultimate 6.5 Creed SAPR. Let me know what you guys like about it, what you hate about it, what you would change, and what your ideal setup is in the comments down below. But with all that out of the way, guys, I do want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace out.